All right, friends, it's time to talk about Chapter 6, Facility Construction. So really the major objective for this chapter is to go through the construction planning and then construction process itself. And there's certain elements that are going to be discussed, such as bidding, contracts, materials, actual planning and construction process. And really, we want to appreciate what is involved in the whole construction process so that we can understand how comprehensive of a process this really is. So, as part of the process, really, we've got the programming, design, construction, and occupancy process. And in each of these phases, there's a different goal or objective. So within the actual programming process, what we're looking at is sort of the decision-making process of what to build, and then going through and trying to understand what are the space constraints, what are the financial constraints, and other material criteria that are going to be incumbent in deciding how a facility is planned, designed, and implemented. So a facility might be planned with a specific dollar amount um, in mind, and therefore we can't go over that dollar amount, or with a less structured, more reactionary approach, um, a facility builder or those who are in charge with designing and building the facility might say, well, we want these specific elements, and then our budget is going to fit that what it's going to cost to build a facility with these elements. So we more want a planned approach, and with the planned approach, it's more looking at what's specifically needed, and then developing the facility based upon those constraints, cost constraints, as well as trying to get the most out of what is desired for that facility. Now, in the design phase, that's really going to be the process of meeting with the architect and designing the facility to meet the specifications that were agreed to in the programming phase. And here you might have different drawings or schematics in place, as well as cost estimates. After that, there would be development design for aspects such as the heating, ventilation, air conditioning system, the HVAC system, and maybe just going through the process of verifying the accuracy of these documents and these plans. And then after all of the planning has occurred in this process, the design phase would move to bidding and trying to get requests for bids in. And once a contractor has been selected, doing the necessary due diligence from a legal and financial perspective in order to make sure that the construction is going to be legally sound and economically sound, and perhaps going through the construction documents, including the contract for that construction. During the construction phase, that is sort of the almost final phase where the contract to build is awarded, and that would be done after doing a diligent checking of qualifications and references for the parties involved, making sure that a construction schedule is developed that is realistic and meets the needs of all parties involved, and then actually completing that construction process, and going through an inspection process of the facility to make sure that it is in line with code and permits and other aspects. So once that construction process is done, the facility would be finished, and the necessary items would be completed based off of what's missing on the punch list, which we'll talk about. And then the building owner would receive the ownership rights. Anything that the builder was doing would be turned over to the building owner, and the design build contract would be completed. The walkthrough and inspections would be completed, and the facility would be open to the public, which would require an occupancy permit. And then the facility would be hopefully maintained adequately over the year through periodic repairs, and renovations would occur as needed. And that's really the construction process. So let's jump into this construction planning process. And what we're looking for is really to find the right builder. And builders come in all shapes and sizes. Now, a government entity is usually going to be bidding out their construction because it has a public works department, and that's going to be part of the payroll that's necessary to build the facility. Now, private entities are usually going to build, also have a bidding for a designated builder to build a sport facility. So at times, a facility owner or an prospective owner might reach out to a representative to act as the middleman between the owner and those who might be contracted to build a facility. And really, that depend on whether or not it's a public approach, a private approach, or a middleman approach. Depends on the variables, such as how much the owner really wants to be involved and the budget size, the time frame for that facility, etc. So there are certainly a number of choices that can be made based off of the amount of builders, the size of the individuals involved, and other constraints that need to be considered. But almost all public projects must go through the bidding process, and most private projects would probably do so as well. But really, the approach is going to depend on the parties involved, the owner involved. Finding the right builder is really about answering specific questions in mind, such as the builder's ability to obtain necessary materials, hire appropriate workers and subcontractors, the ability to purchase materials and goods at cost or at a good cost, and then also working with those subcontractors to make sure that they are kept on time and on budget, and to make sure that the project itself is on time and under budget. So all of these aspects are very much important. And as the process goes through its bidding, the bidding process, there would be a call for a request for qualifications, or a request for proposals, or a request for bids, which are all very similar. We're basically trying to get a contractor to put in a bid as to how much it would cost the owner to build that facility. And this would really help the owner understand who is out there, what companies are out there that meet those necessary minimum qualifications, and that's one of the aspects of that request for bids or request for proposals. Now, once that bid goes out, there might be a bit of negotiation between the owner and the entity, the contractor that's selected as the most desirable based on that bid, and there could be some negotiation back and forth for developing a contract. And really, for that process, we're looking at the expertise of the parties, of the engineering staff or the contractor, what sort of technical competence is required, maybe looking at letters of recommendation, looking at the ability for that contractor to control costs, et cetera, et cetera. And then once that is all decided, a construction contract between the owner, prospective owner, and the prospective contractor, the builder, would be drafted. And there are specific construction options. There could be a lump sum option, a construction management option, guaranteed maximum price, and turnkey. And all of these different options are listed in the textbook at table 6.1. And here, it talks about some of the advantages and disadvantages. A lump sum construction contract is really going to be situations where the costs are known for this project at the start. And if the costs rise, however, the quality of that construction might be forced to lower. Now, another one that might be desirable is the guaranteed maximum price, which is where you actually have a company that's going to list, what is going to be the fixed costs and going to be the maximum price. And here it's really what's the cost known from the start. But again, any sort of changes to that max price is going to change the cost. Another option is going to be turnkey, where the construction company really builds the contract with not much input from the prospective owner, and then the construction company just gives the keys to the new building owner at the end. So that would be a different approach than, say, construction management, or maybe having a design build contract where there's more feedback involved. So those are some options. Now, once the request for bidding or request for qualifications go out, and the bids have been reviewed, and there's an appropriate contractor that has been chosen, and of course the contract's been signed, then we would move on to the pre-construction phase. And in the pre-construction phase, that's going to be where a lot of documentation comes into play. And remember, just once you select the appropriate contractor, we also need to understand whether or not there's going to be guarantees that the work will be completed. And this might be done through a construction bond, which is basically a amount of money that is placed into some sort of trust account that ensures, in the event that something goes wrong with the build, that the prospective owner can be made whole, that they can collect on that bond. And sometimes that bond, when it's needs to be paid out. So that's also important to make sure that a proper contractor is selected that is able to, one, put forth that bond, and two, do everything in their power to avoid that bond being exercised pursuant to the terms of that contract. So part of making sure that the terms are never, that bond is never paid, is making sure that the pre-construction phase and construction phase is done on schedule and according to proper workmanship. So as part of that workmanship, the site drawings are going to be drafted, and it's a litany of drawings. The first one, really, the site drawings are about information discussing the location, geographically speaking, and really any sort of land or roads or any sort of ancillaries that are necessary, and then future utilities that might be needed. Architectural drawings are just going to show the floor plan from the lowest to highest, and then there'd be plumbing, which are really talking about plumbing and fixtures. Structural drawings, which are going to be supporting systems, really regarding the structural integrity of the facility. Mechanical drawings, it's going to be about HVAC, again, the heating, ventilation, air conditioning system, location of the ductwork, and any sort of other aspects where parts of that HVAC are going to be placed. Electrical drawing is going to be, of course, for the electrical demands of the facility. We also, once we go through that, we might need to go through the site preparation of this facility. So that is where the field office is going to be established. Maybe access roads that didn't previously exist, they need to be created, clearing, shrubbing, and vegetation. There might be some grubbing, which is kind of removing some of the excess vegetation, like I just said, and that is going to be usually paired with boring into the soil, which we discussed in the last chapter, to make sure that that soil is suitable for that proposed foundation as part of that facility, going through the process in which the contractor understands and can determine what is the presence of that soil, so rock, organic materials, potential dangerous materials in that for that facility. The water table could be tested, etc., etc. So this is pretty comprehensive earthwork. Then that area is going to be cleared so that the building area, which is really going to be 5 feet beyond the limits of the proposed structure, can also be insured. A facility, before construction also occurs, might need to grade the different elements of that land so that different dips or hills or irregularities of the topography can be uniformly graded so that you've got one flat surface where it's where that facility can be built. So raising or lowering that proposed site, and that can be take up time and money where the contractor might need to use bulldozers or excavators or even going excavating by hand. So this could be a comprehensive process. But once that process is accomplished, we'd be moving on to the construction phase, and the first part of that construction is really laying down the foundational materials. And the textbook suggests looking at building a facility as putting together a jigsaw puzzle. So the foundational aspects of foundation are going to be the beginning of your jigsaw puzzle. So here, the different elements like concrete, which is composed of water, cement and rock or sand combination would be used, or wood, or steel. Steel is iron and ore and limestone. So different elements are going to be used as part of this construction process, and that the foundation is going to be laid. Of course, the textbook also talks about these trusses, which are going to be laminated wood, and that's going to be used to provide a higher element of strength that can be helpful for providing rigid frames or even arches or vaults as part of this construction facility. So once the foundation is created, then we would be moving on to the substructure. And the substructure is defined as anything that is at or below the ground levels. So this is going to help to transfer the structural load from a building into maybe the rocks or soil or any base that was going to make the facility as safe as possible. So here also the facility builder needs to worry about preventing moisture from penetrating concrete and getting into the structure. So maybe using crushed gravel or stone would be helpful, and anything that's going to help the foundation transfer the building weight to the earth below. And that's really important when you're talking about the substructure and the foundation working together. Then we've got the superstructure. And the superstructure is anything and everything that is above the substructure. So it could be things like trusses or beams or columns. It can be the exterior components, the interior components, anything that is going to be above the substructure. A potential area to worry about for the superstructure is the exterior components, because they can often be the most expensive aspects of the facility. So things that are going to be made of glass or steel or brick or plastic, anything that's made of wood can be used as part of the exterior because not only are they going to be used as a display for the facility, but it will also be usually used as a load-bearing structural element that's going to be used as a wall. So certainly the material, no matter what it's used, is going to need to be weatherproofed and provide insulation to that interior of the facility. This is also where you're going to see aspects on some facilities such as turf or the watering system, certainly the roof. So it can get very expensive. There are three types of roofs. There is a pitched roof, a flat roof, and a dome. A pitched roof is going to be built with a slope to help to facilitate drainage and also snow melting where that's applicable. Of course, we know what a dome is. A dome is going to have a specific pattern, and it's going to provide a clearance and a greater amount of clearance for internal activities. And then finally, we've got a flat roof, which is going to have a minimal slope. So each of these different elements costs, but any roof is typically going to be supported by trusses, which I'll show you in a couple of minutes. And then there's the inner components, the inner core that's important for this construction. So this is going to include the foundation, the wiring necessary for the electrical aspects, the walls, plumbing, HVAC, anything that is going to not go above and beyond just the walls, but then all the systems, both internal and external, that are necessary for the facility to run smoothly. So this also might include your water surface, like I said, your fixtures, your the either grass or turf of the facility, and anything that is going to be things like artwork, flooring, ceiling tiles. That's part of your furniture and fixtures. Your anything related to your internal components, interior components like wood, plastic, or metal components to help provide the millwork, which is this customized finishes. So it is a great deal of information. Also, the seating of the facility is also important, and then flooring, which the textbook talks about different types of flooring that might be necessary, whether it's composite flooring, wood flooring, or stone. And so in terms of floor, it's important to understand what your flooring you're using to help improve stability. So as I said before, we're going to talk about trusses. Trusses are going to be elements that are going to support the building shell and used as a rigging to allow things like lights and speakers to hang from your frame, scoreboards, anything that's going to be pretty considerable weight that are going to be hung from your facility. Trusses, here's another picture of the trusses. Here's the wood trusses, and they're being used to support the roof, as well as it can be used to hang things. So all of these aspects are going to be important. When you're dealing with a building that is maybe historic or older, things like restoration and renovation might be required, and that's could be even more expensive than construction because of the historic nature of the facility. So some aspects when you're talking about restoration and renovation is dealing with health concerns such as asbestos or lead paint due to the historic nature, how that renovation will impact existing tenants, and then whether time will be available to actually make that renovation. The textbook references renovations at Soldier Field as the example. Projected costs for that project are certainly important, and standard budget items really consist of the following here. Preliminary costs such as acquiring or paying the site, helping to develop the site, any sort of legal fees associated with acquiring the site, which is the land, the cost of putting forward a bond, promotion, publicity, et cetera, maybe even dealing with consultants. Next is architectural fees, things like the design or engineering plans, supervising the architectural aspects and engineering requirements. Construction costs, that's going to really be about paying for the contractor and subcontractors. Maybe there's a foreman that's necessary for supervision, paying for the occupying or occupancy permits. Equipment and furniture that can be up to 15% of the total budget. Paying for insurance, another legal instrument. If what happens if the project is not completed on time, or if there's an incident or accident on the building site. So dealing with those liability and financial issues, and then contingencies, just things that might happen or might not happen. Money that might be more money to pay for building materials, or any sort of last minute additions that were not in the original budget. Direct costs might also include paying for the labor, paying for, and I apologize. So here are some of the preliminary costs that I just referenced. Here's some of the architectural costs. Here are some of the construction costs. And then here are some of the furniture costs. So my apologies for not showing you these slides in order. Direct costs are going to be costs for including for labor, maybe materials, your equipment, any potential subcontracting. Indirect costs are going to be any sort of legal fees or insurance, printing costs, anything that's not directly associated with putting together the building. So this is certainly important. And then landscaping is certainly important. and that can be part of the variable costs, although landscaping is helpful because it can turn something that might be uninviting part of the property into an inviting aspect of the property. There's also aspects with buying trees that have already matured so that they can go into the facility looking like this. It's not a miniature tree, but buying these landscaping aspects can actually be pretty expensive. So it's certainly important. We're talking about the costs, project costs. Unexpected things do come up, and oftentimes these unexpected costs can create cost variables that can make your project even more expensive. Things like additional costs in transportations or errors, relocating and moving materials and expenses, and unanticipated environmental issues. These all can add to the cost of your facility. But once the facility is constructed and completed, that's where you'd have the completion uh, of the project. There might be some cleaning involved. There might be a need for it to consult the punch list, and the punch list, like I said, is a record of small matters that need to be addressed by the owner, or that need to be addressed before the owner can take ownership of the facility. So those aspects of the punch list need to be completed. Um, and of course, once that punch list has been completed and the owner is satisfied, then the ownership would ownership would change, and control would be changed from the builder to the owner, and you'd have a final inspection, making sure that the engineer accepts the project as final, and that it's done so on behalf of the owner. And this would be done so that the contractor can actually submit their request to be paid that final amount of money that's owed. And once that all is done, then the occupancy permit will be provided, assuming that it passes inspection. And once that occupancy permit is provided, then it would be opened for the public. Certainly, many facilities are going to have a warranty. The text mentions that most buildings come with a 1-year warranty. So any sort of issues that arise in that first year should be monitored so that the builder will be financially responsible for replacement or remedying those issues pursuant to what a warranty is. It's a legal promise that they're going to be financially responsible for the issues that come up within that time period, usually here 1 year. Some challenges that might occur when building a facility might be a owner not contracting with an experienced architect that knows about sport facilities, or an engineering firm that can be helpful and knowledgeable in that area. Also, not communicating properly to the designer about what that owner is interested in can also create an issue. That lack of proper communication, allowing the engineer and architect to actually interview and hire consultants is an issue if those interviews and hirings are excessive and inflate price. Failing to establish a hard budget and holding that builder to that budget can also inflate costs. And then on sort of the flip side, the corollary, not monitoring the work done by subcontractors or the contractor itself can lead to issues. So a lack of communication, a lack of monitoring. And then, of course, not planning for proper contingencies can also be an issue. So all of these, failing to communicate, failing to be present, all of these issues can lead to pitfalls when you're talking about a facility. But from a general perspective, the construction process really starts with finding a qualified builder who's capable of delivering the correct building on time and hopefully under budget. And proper documentation and supplies is necessary. Now, things like a ironclad building construction contract, and then making sure that contractor is properly bonded, can be very important in saving the owner time, money, and worry. So proper care needs to be taken to ensure that the facility is built on budget without compromising quality. And that's really where that experienced and knowledgeable architect and engineering firm who understands sport facilities is going to come into play. So certainly the construction process is a lengthy process that requires proper planning and execution. And although the trend, as the textbook mentions, is that firms are building facilities in quicker time, it's still important to make sure that the constant communication is done in a way that is going to make sure that the facility is on time and under budget, and that the various constraints that we talked about are met, whether it's the pre-construction process or whether it is the construction process and all facets of the construction process. And then, of course, making sure that the post-construction process, when we're talking about the inspection and completion and analysis, is properly done. So hopefully this chapter was helpful, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you online. Thank you, or offline.